So we're back into a committee discussion mode. And I just want to sort of keep talking as we were. And we kind of have had a couple of hours since we ended our last discussion. And, first of all, I just open the floor to if anybody had any bigger thoughts, but I would also sort of ask maybe each of us to talk about one or two things we're struggling with as we try to weigh the pros and cons of whatever it is we choose to do. I don't know if anybody's got some thoughts there. I mean, every time I sort of have a broader view of this, trying to accomplish, I get like, oh, I'm really passionate about this. Oh, I kind of forgot about this end of things. So I got to thinking a little bit about some of the stuff that Representative Brady said in our last go around, which is sort of, saying the hard stuff out loud. So, I also had a discussion with the delegate from the Vermont School Board Association with the question being, well, how are we still just dumping the same hard problems onto school boards? Closing schools, figuring out busing, all that. And how are we making school boards work easier? Thinking about that as well. So those are just things that I'm struggling with where, I think it'd be really easy. It's really easy for me to say, I want fewer and larger districts governed by 11-member school boards, all of the other things I sort of advocated for, and say, hey, all right, good work. But that does sort of pass the buck on the hard decisions that I, as a school board member, when I was one, begged the state to take more of an active role in. We have done a little bit of that by establishing class size minimums. But, to what extent do we take on the unfair, hard questions? Representative Brady brought up the fact that, do we say, something? We are going to consolidate districts, but not all of them, just the small ones. That seems, that could be effective, but it also be seen as unfair. These are just, I'm not really sure where I'm going. I'm just trying to be put on the table here things I'm struggling with, and not quite sure how to find our way out of that. On the other hand, I look at the opportunity. If we are starting from scratch with newer, larger districts, that allows a school board to, and we say those districts are operating, not non-operating. It allows a broader area with which one could come up with creative solutions. So if you are a larger district, and within that district, there's a couple of large high schools and maybe a small high school, you can have the conversation. This small high school, due to declining enrollment, as a standard issue high school, may not be viable. However, in this broader system, maybe that is the magnet school for kids who want to study music or the outdoors. So I think, well, there's opportunity in scale as well in dealing with, in both sort of maintaining some of the things we hold dear, but also addressing the challenges that are facing us. I'm going to stop talking and let anybody else jump in. I can't carry us for the next 45 minutes.
We were all just going to let you keep going.
Yeah.
I think we're all feeling very similar feelings. We're drawn in every different direction. Coming from a rural area, like I am, there is no question the next steps we take are going to create a lot of upheaval in every corner of the state, because that's the nature of transformation, right? And so I'm still struggling with the timeline, the inability to bring community voice into the disruption that will be caused by, I know Representative Harp will appreciate that I'm the one saying it instead of her this time, but the school closures that are gonna happen, we're all talking about it finally, which I think is really important. Because it will happen, and it is happening, and I know the upheaval happens because I'm dealing with it right now. It already happens, and so where I'm struggling is I don't have a problem with getting behind doing what's right for our schools and our kids and our communities, as long as I can say, this is why we're doing it. And this is what the outcome, these are what our goals are and our out of what we expect from it. And I again said this morning, and I'm still, I love that budgeting model, and it is done very intentionally, and it is essentially exactly what we do in our own district, right? I mean, it really is. It's just not done in the same manner in which they do it with intention, and it's harder to keep staff around long enough to be able to keep a model like that going. But I need to know that if we're going to go through this change, that I can get behind it because we have goals and we have outcomes. The other thing I'm still struggling with, and I think Rep. Brady did bring this up, this SU-SD conversation. Having been a part of SUs forever, I recognize the challenge, and if we're going to go with larger districts, I can't picture a mixed delivery system like we have in my region without either changing the mixed delivery or staying in SU. And I just can't picture a much larger SU than even my own SU, and there's 4 SUs in my county, and continuing to operate the same way. Or we have to grab, decide what we're going to do. We have to make some decisions about it.
All right, Josh, you're up.
So struggling with, right, like probably the same thing 90% of us are, or 80% of us, or 100% is looking at the communities we serve. Specifically to the way I look at it is I'm serving my 2 towns specifically when I'm on the floor, but when I'm in committee, I have to think of the whole state. I can't just think of my 2 towns. And I have to think of how Colchester is different than Williamstown, is different than Glover, is different than, Milton. And then I have 2 towns that, while they saw opportunities generated by their mergers, in some cases they didn't see the savings they were promised, and they're looking at what we're doing now as much as the same as we've done before. But also there's the pragmatic and business side of me that looks at the economies of scale and sees where that benefit is and how it can create more opportunities, especially when you can bring more students together. So that's like the struggle, right? My communities are saying we need more opportunities, we need more of this, but we need to save money. We're spending too much. And the last time we merged, we didn't see that benefit, and more so, like I talk to Chelsea as much as possible, but I've been living in Williamstown for all this time, and they feel that they got the short end of the stick of the merge, or a lot of people do. So it's like trying to weigh my own communities, right? And then say in this room, I actually have to weigh all of the communities, and I have to look at, those communities that, need this from the education system and need that, or don't need this because they're really self-sufficient and self-reliant, or have the funds to do it. So, I mean, it's literally that hamster wheel that keeps going round and round, trying to weigh all of this. So like, that's what I'm struggling with all the time. But I always have to keep in mind that I'm looking at the whole state, not just my community, when I'm sitting in this room.
Thank you. Else want to jump in?
Definitely struggling with the process. Feeling the weight of knowing that it all starts in this room. And unless we start making some decisions, we are staying exactly where we are right now. We're trying to figure out how we're all gonna coalesce around some united idea that can leave this room and get to the larger body.
Yeah, I mean, I'll kind of build upon that, but in a somewhat political way. I mean, one of the reasons that we are all feeling a little bit stuck and hamstrung is because we're getting mixed signals from Vermonters. A lot of Vermonters are pretty disengaged with what we are doing. We hear from, let's say, many who are very loud voices, but we hear from many, we don't hear from many more. But in part because the case hasn't been made. This is my repeated pet peeve that we needed that education transformation needed a public champion with the political clout to go out and sell it to Vermonters. We didn't get that. And so now we are here struggling with the fact that Vermonters are as sort of confused themselves as they were 12 months ago, 24 months ago, however you want to measure it. And we are stuck with that problem as well. And I don't know if we can get out of it. I don't know if we're going to be able to move beyond where we are. I share your frustration that if we don't make some sort of forward movement, then we are where we are. And where we are right now is not a good place.
I think I'm sorry.
Please.
I think we all, I think our body had its the confusion of all this. At the end of last session, whether you liked it or not, we had an Act 73, which we still have, put into law that people saw and people knew. And now we've started deviating from that, and that adds to the confusion just as much as anything else does.
Yes, I mean, we would be, we were sitting here with 3 options for maps that made everybody happy, we'd be in a different place. But to the extent that the work of the task force represented the view of Vermonters is, we can debate that.
Right.
But we are where we are.
We are.
Okay.
That's exactly what I was going to say. So Rob, how are we going to fix it?
Well, I have
I have the winner, but you go ahead.
Yeah, no, I have a thought on that. And I mean, people obviously feel different ways about how the task force report came out. I guess as someone who was part, as we all were, of the process on a really tight time frame of developing Act 73 over a couple of months last session, like personally, I'm really relieved that the task force took such an expansive view of the work ahead of them. So, I mean, yes, if we could have had a clearer path when we started this session, but I think finding the right answer is more important. That's an opinion.
We are up against a lot of things here. The challenge before us that we all have, we have all of our own personal politics. For those who choose to run again, this is a sort of big matter as well. And just put on the table is something. The other thing that I'm sure each in our own mind we're wrestling with.
I just want to say, because you made me think of it, I mentioned that struggled with timeline. And I've been struggling with the timeline from the time we first stepped into the session last year to the end of the session, and the timeline that happened over the summer, which I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, even in the task force having basically 4 months to work, we heard in testimony that they really only had 2 months with the data that they had because they were asking for a lot of data. So, I mean, it's all part of it. It's not just the future timeline of Act 73 or what we have on our plates in this committee, but it's this is huge, that what we're trying to do. It's transformative, what we're trying to do. It's not something that we've been trying to do for a year or two. It's something we've been trying to do for decades. And I want to make sure we're doing it right. And I want to make sure we're taking the time to do it right. And I know we're going to always be able to take time.
So here's what I'm going to start as we have these conversations, as my role as chair is to say, okay, the two of you have a problem with the timeline. What do you suggest? And I'm not saying answer it right now. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
come
No, it's
back with
fair.
some specifics.
Absolutely.
And as I hear people's concerns and thoughts and all that, I really appreciate all of it. We are, much of what people have been saying have been, giving me more food for thought, but I am gonna have to start saying, okay, well then what? And, I think if people are advocates for the status quo, say it. There's an argument for that as well. No, I was not accusing you of saying something.
No, I know that. And I don't know that we've actually heard anybody saying that. I think we're all just wrestling with what's the right pace of change, right? Like we all want to move forward. We all want change, like the superintendents, the principals, everybody agrees on that, school boards. It's just, what's achievable and what's the right pace.
The reality of it is too, is that we're not gonna get this 100% right, no matter what we do. It's gonna be a fluid thing, even after we pass it all. There's gonna be changes that we say, we didn't really think that one all the way through and needs to be changed to this. So if we're gonna look for perfection the first time through, we're gonna be here 15 years from now doing the same.
That's clear.
We're not gonna be here, somebody will be here. Right, so-
Bill already passed.
So there's that, a desire to need to move forward with some action to move us down the road a little bit. In my opinion.
I was thinking about what you just said, Peter, about just the small ones. Well, I mean, another approach is, if we're taking a step back, there are plenty of school systems at scale that are doing a good job and already working. Right? So we identify those and we look into places where we need help and how to bolster those things. Maybe that's kind of like a coming in from the side kind of thing, rather than going, okay, let's get the mapping tools and let's dice up the state. Why not look and see who's working, what's working, who's at scale. And where are the places that, we're losing kids and places that need help. And that's kind of like maybe just a smaller one. Some of those aren't small, but I mean, maybe we're throwing help to where they need help. And that's how we start determining where these districts happen.
Yeah.
And that would go along with what the superintendent said, being strategic mergers, right? Because some places, are good. They don't need any help. They don't need to be screwed up either.
Yes, those places can also be expensive, but we're going to have to take words from like throw them some help and make that a much more less abstract, much more specific term.
Yeah. Yep. But
Because a foundation formula, for example, is in fact that.
yes,
It recognizes that some districts need more funding than others based on student profile.
but I guess just being more like laser beam targeted to saying, these are the areas that really need help. How do we, okay, but what if we did this? And even we get on the phone and say, what happened, superintendent or principal, what would happen if?
Well, yes, but our ability to sort of micromanage or, is somewhat the level to which we could drill down.
Right, these might be
It's challenging.
hypotheticals. What would you say if these things were to happen?
Because,
What
as
are the
we,
possibilities? Talk to me tomorrow, right? Like, think about this.
I mean, no, here's a good point, because we've heard the argument time and time again that we have got districts, or that how much you spend doesn't necessarily reflect. We have districts that spend well below the state average and get above the state average results. Well, why don't we replicate that? Well, every part of Vermont's completely different.
There's a human factor,
It was a huge impact.
To be a little more precise on the
Thank
timeline
you.
part,
Please.
I just went back to my floor report from last year of H454, so I'm not advocating for the status quo, just found my newspaper article where I explained it over 3 pages to Williston. So what came out of here in the House, I don't think was by any means perfect, and we were working under extreme circumstances and doing our best. I supported it. I tried to sell it on the floor. I think that one of, if not the most important piece of that timeline was, and I know this will not be genuinely agreed on by all in this room, was the class size minimum policies and the timeline for them. And I just had to go back to my flow report to find, you know, these class size minimums were supposed to go into effect and they were only a 2-year average, not a 3-year, and they were slightly different than what ended up in the conference report, but those are supposed to be going into effect this August. And I know that's another way at the hard problem we're all talking about, which is some school closures. But it is one that has come to us again and again from educational experts in the educational field, saying this is something that we need in order to be able to make the right educational decisions in our community. And in my mind, that was, again, perhaps maybe the most important piece of the legislation in starting to shift scale. And instead, we slowed that down and sped up the foundation formula. And so the collision of those two, I become more concerned about the foundation formula when we move to it even faster and we haven't dealt with the underlying. And this alone does not solve it, but to me, it was one of our most important pieces. So the timeline, you know, maybe there is some acceleration of some dates and some pushing back of others. If it were up to me, the class sizes and then putting the meat on the bones, including the money for the school construction money, are the things to speed up. The foundation formula, I am not opposed to. I'm not sure we are ready or we understand the intersection with enough. What else might happen?
Thank you for
So
being
there's
very
specific.
specific.
Thanks, right?
As maybe another exercise in trying to move forward, is there any desire to take a closer look at that hybrid map that the Agency of Education showed us the other day? To talk about it, poke holes in it, there's got to be something somebody likes about it, to have a discussion about it. I don't know, just throwing it out there.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean we have to have that decision right now, but it's a map. They're not endorsing it by any means. They even said it in the committee or in the hearing, but
If we're going to go forward with this redistricting, I think that would at least be a start, something to look at, something to get some ideas from.
So thank you both for this agenda. We are meeting with Senate Education to discuss exactly, not discuss, but we are going to get some field reaction to what was put on the table. So as a starting point, thanks for
exactly what we need.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
I'll just say, since you really want specifics, Peter, and I understand totally why you do. I can't take regional comprehensive high schools off the table anymore now that it's been put on in the way that it has been. I have no clue about the timeline and the dollars and construction aid fits into that, but I don't want to go into this continued conversation around transforming an education system without looking long range. And it's the only way I can sell it to people that I represent and Vermonters in general. And that piece to me is really important, as is the long conversation we had yesterday, today around the sets of books.
So in my effort to make us all drill down to specifics, I don't know what that means. In other words, first of all, we need to define, use the legal definition of comprehensive high school, which I think we probably all are in agreement of that. But putting it on the table, I don't know, how do we flesh out the concept? I mean, I'm asking you, or all of us to think about, like, what does that mean if we were to sit down and say, we want this in proposed language?
Yeah.
I like the idea, but I don't know how you select where it goes and what it means. Take those and develop them.
And that specific point, I know we couldn't get him yesterday. I think that Jay Bottoms was the most deeply involved in the super hyper map work in the task force related to high schools. I know they couldn't put out, these are where they should, if I can do that on my own, but it also might be worth all of us hearing kind of the next level of detail about that part of the task force from him, because I also think that it probably isn't impossible to figure that out. Like there's not gonna be there's not gonna be that many schools, there's 80,000 kids. We know where the big schools are. Like yes, this is hard, but I'm not sure it's impossible to.
Yeah, I just, as I think about it, I know where high schools are.
Right.
But I don't know if where high schools are is the same thing as regional high schools.
Would that be organically decided when a bigger district has been formed, or would that be something that gets formulated before the districts? Which comes first, the chicken or the regional high school?
So I mean, Addison County would make a great sized district. If you look at the three larger school districts that are there, combine them into one with the idea of a comprehensive high school, which I think actually people love it. But in order to have that actually not make kids be on buses for hours, you can build a whole new high school and career center centrally located within the geographic area. But to the extent that that's a concept that is achievable, I mean, right down to, are there soils in that area that can accommodate a septic system for a high school? That's where I get I get too in the weeds, but that's the challenge.
Well, there's a pretty good section in this dependency on about guiding principles and all.
Great.
And are we going to get Jay? I mean, I know we asked him to come in and then he couldn't make it in.
We had not gone any further. If that's to the committee's liking, we can certainly have him in. We got time to schedule. The interview was pained.
I mean, I don't think your invitation was an invitation to just bitch about everything about this act that I don't like. So like, I'm not gonna do that.
Yeah.
I mean, was it? I think-
No. We are forward thinking. What can we do that would make it out of this committee? And I don't know. I haven't taken the temperature. We've had people missing to say, like, is the concept of bigger, larger districts mandated by the state a non-go within us?
I guess.
I wanted to talk first.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I want to have a better idea of when we talk about consolidating districts, are we really talking about consolidating schools? And I want to have an honest conversation about that. And I just feel like we're all over the map on that. And I think about like this concept of equity and, nobody's talking about like kids in Burlington and Winooski being on buses for 45 minutes. And that's because they don't have to, right? Because they can get that many in there with those minimum class sizes. I think, maybe we should be open to considering that minimum class sizes across the state should not be uniform. That, we've got different ways that people live in our state. We are a very rural state and can't outlaw ruralness. But if we're not going to consider that, I guess in thinking about the school construction, it seems to me like when a lot of people talk about consolidating the schools, at least in my area, they're talking about like Danville and Cabot will all go to Hazen. But Hazen still isn't as nice as the theaters at U32 or the science lab. So they're not going to get anything better. We're just going to have to shut down one small school to put them in another small school that also is still really inadequate and doesn't offer any of the things that kids across the state get to. So I guess like if we could, actually be like, we're going to put a ton of money into those parts of the state and build new construction and give them theaters the size of B32 and science labs, that are equitable to that. Maybe you might have a chance of getting people excited about that. But right now we're just talking about moving them out of one small school into another comparably really not as great small school. So that's one thing I think that we could do. However, I think we also need to acknowledge that not everyone thinks that bigger is better. And a lot of people moved to small towns because they wanted small schools and they wanted small class sizes. So how are we going to deal with that? Like, you know, I think we talk a lot about Vermont needs us to make this decision, but yet they're all shouting us down. Like maybe we should actually find a way to listen. I don't know. We've already
So-
decided we're not going to though, so.
So just to respond a little bit, when I didn't say Vermonters were looking for us to make our system, school boards. were
Right,
looking for us to
okay.
because it's on their shoulders. And again, one of for me, one of the important things about creating a new system is to be as sort of resilient as we can to declining enrollment. And, again, I'll just keep saying it. It's not it's not governance that closes small schools. It's declining enrollment and you reach a certain point. So, I think that the problem is the demographics are moving at a far more rapid pace than changes. And we're finding ourselves sort of stuck in a situation where we are probably keeping too many schools open based on the enrollment that we have. And, the inequity of Hazen not being U32 is because of the system that we've had going up to this point.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that if we want to look at bolstering up sort of our enrollment and our population, then maybe we really need to invest at this time in our most rural places rather than kind of like move people on out. Because I think that the problem is going to get a lot worse long-term if you know that if you go settle in the Northeast Kingdom, you're probably gonna have to be bussed into Chittenden County to go to school, right? So if we make huge investments now, and like, fine, maybe I can accept that I'm losing the bigger is better argument, and we're gonna do this. So then in that case, I would say, let's really go whole hog and let's invest in these rural places and let's make it so that these are these incredible places that people want to move because suddenly they're doing better than they ever have before, not that we've moved those resources out.
I think it's a great point.
And I know we're in very different places. I couldn't agree more. I think fundamentally what we're wrestling with is a challenge of Vermont. And, when the governor or anybody's talking about nostalgia, this is not just about school boards and school, like this is Vermont. And I don't live in it, so it's awkward, but Vermont has held on to a rural, small village way of life that most rural states have not been able to for across a variety of ways. This is about schools, but really it's about much more than that. My frustration from 2 years ago, certainly last year, has been that I hate talking about closing schools, and I realize it's crummy for me to sit here knowing it's probably not going to happen in Williston anytime soon. Who knows eventually, but that we aren't, it's all sort of about loss. Like, I've heard John Castle, who I respect tremendously as an expert in rural education, that there is loss here. And we, the legislature, the state, anyone, we don't have a kind of vision for, something different, not just loss, moving beyond that, a kind of, like, what are the things to look forward to? And it's not going to be the same. But, if we're going to build a really state-of-the-art regional high school, let's put it in a desert and in a place relatively as much as you can with geography to where there is going to be probably a lot of, it's going to be different, but I do think we should have been like, that's probably the biggest challenge of all this is that we've never offered all along. I think this has been about rural Vermont could lose a lot. And what are they going to get for it? And how do you, and it's going to be different. That's going to be hard anyway. But I would love to see us say, we're going to put, in the Northeast Kingdom, take 3 places in the state. And we are going to put state-of-the-art, that can multi-use, multi-generational, multi-use buildings and forward-thinking, but regional, middle, and high schools, we're probably going to lose a bunch of small schools. But it's not,
I think, and yeah, maybe that's what we need to do. I think that maybe we should consider a few more in rural areas than some, like, make them a little bit closer together, not have people so spread out, and really think about what are these minimum class size numbers. I'm racking my brain trying to figure out who told me or where I heard about that. There's currently one school in the state that would meet minimum class sizes, or one district. It was one district. I have it in my notes somewhere. I can't remember where I saw it.
I think that's amazing because our class size minimums that we put in there are so low.
They're not low for the Northeast Statement, like it's,
No, but for a
I think
school,
Milton would. I think that's what I heard, that
Yeah.
Milton would meet the class size.
okay, so somewhere that statistic is floating. I wish I could find
Yeah.
We
it.
get
I
hung
can't
up on
think of it
class
right now.
size minimums, but there's the multi-grade classroom part of it that also has a huge impact in rural areas. Where
Right.
some, you can only have.
I don't want to relitigate class size minimums, but there are built-in, exceptions.
Yeah, well, neither do I. I'm just more thinking about when we're gonna invest in these bigger schools, like maybe a few more of them in really scattered rural areas than in, some of the areas where it's easier to get to them and fill them with those class size minimums. Like, let's not necessarily have someone who needs to travel from like Newport to St. Johnsbury, although that's a bad example, because St. Johnsbury's got all their independent schools in that area, but like, across 2 or 3 counties.
I think you're bringing up probably quite a divide we just have in Vermonters' attitudes or legislators' attitudes to this. I tend to be a little bit more dark cloudish. I do not believe that there's going to be this great surge of families because birth rates are way down, and young people are choosing to live in walkable, diverse, culturally interesting places.
Really lose to population, like it's a
yeah.
statewide issue.
And this has been going on since well before the pandemic. The pandemic sort of put a pause on it. So, I'm less optimistic that if you build it, they will come. And you have to justify the use of the dollars. That being said, the system we have has created the inequities that we have. But moving forward, I think your point and I think we really need to sort of separate younger grades versus older grades. That, why can't Hayes be a great high school at the level of other high schools that you may think are better? And maybe our funding reflects that with the foundation formula, but I think you bring up a good point. If the Hazen's going to be the regional high school, and it can be the thing that attracts people to that area, then yeah, let's supercharge it.
It's also the opportunity.
And that's just an example, yeah.
We just talked about the regional high school, I support that. But there's also the opportunity to do that investment in communities that are, I have one, right? 3 communities together that each have a school, and they could get them all into one if there was a financial investment made in that one school. And if there wouldn't be, I think, as anywhere near the pushback against doing it if we were making the investment. And then we'd be closing 2 out of 3 schools and having better, opportunities for kids, and better, we'd be meeting class size minimums then and all of that. You see what I'm saying? It can happen at a local level, depending on where you are, but there are opportunities in the state to do that.
Well, and we got to be careful about, I think it's hard to make everything all stick and no carrot.
Just talking about investment and return on investment. Buy-in.
Really? Yeah, please.
We're never going to reach perfection. We're never going to have complete equity. There are also, the state of Vermont is small, but the way people live and the way they believe in their culture in the Northeast Kingdom may be tremendously different than that in the other end of the state. So to try to feed everybody hot dogs on Monday is not going to work. So we can't let those things hold us back. I think we have to move forward, realizing that we're not going to end up with a perfect deal. And if we do keep holding back, trying, we're going to be right doing what we're doing next May. What we're doing right now, we're doing in May. And I don't think our constituents want to see us do that. They expect something, even if it's not perfect. But I've spent the last number of years dealing with Fish and Wildlife Act 250 and cows and cornfields, so I'm, we've been here 10 days, so you don't have to listen to a thing that I'm saying.
Represent a part of the state for which this is, so many levels of this are highly important to them in terms of the islands. You know, they have significant declining enrollment. They've already closed schools. They have choice. You know, just sort of all the factors are up there.
They're in pretty good shape, really. They don't have a high school to deal with. They still have that opportunity to go just about anywhere they want to school.
And it's sort of,
Different, that situation. But still,
you know, if we just had the 6 billion that fits up our schools, we'd be great shape. All right, if everybody's feeling talked out, we'll break until after 4. And we'll come back here to sort of have a who else do you want to hear from conversation. And check the agenda as well. It keeps getting updated.